What's up, guys? A little while back, I visited my college friends in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and on the way back, I made it a little bit of a work trip by visiting cherry corals in Livonia, which is located just north of Detroit. Cherry Corals is one of the best online coral sellers, as well as an active participant in the frag swap circuit. So if you've attended a local trade show in the past several years, you may have seen their booth. I've known the guys at Cherry for well over 10 years, but this is my first ever visit to their coral farm. Let's take a look. Cherry Corals is situated in a warehouse complex with no sign, which is something I can totally get behind. So if you pull up to Tidal Gardens, you would never know that there was a coral farm back here. All it looks like from the street is a tiny farmhouse. It's really easy to drive right past it. I live here and trust me, I miss my own driveway sometimes. On this road trip, I actually drove past Cherry Coral's warehouse because they had their door open and their building number is printed on the door. So yep, rolled right on past. Before we get into the details of their tanks, I have to first say that it's really nice to visit other coral retailers, especially ones that have been active coral farming for a long time. It's nice to talk shop because everyone does these systems slightly differently. There's a lot of similarities in husbandry, but it's those subtle differences that are really interesting. There are a lot of lessons to be learned from looking at other people's systems, so without further ado, let's see what Cherry Corals has going on. First and foremost, let's talk about the ridiculous quality and selection of their corals. I almost always jump right into the equipment and system design, but it would be a real disservice to the beautiful selection of corals that they have here. A lot of larger places I visit are trying to cater to the broader market of coral buyers, so they're going to have a mix of both what I would call bread and butter staples, as well as a few higher end pieces. The coral selection at Cherry Corals, though, is skewed heavily towards the very high end pieces. It's more of a well-curated art collection more than an all-purpose shop. This is the kind of place that I like. It's like a rare art collection where it's clear that they've gone out of their way to track down the most amazing pieces and pretty much completely ignored everything else. Alright, let's go over the system design now. On first glance, the facility is laid out in rows of fiberglass tanks, each with a footprint of 8 feet by 4 feet. They've got a good-sized water makeup station, as well as work areas for propagation and quarantine. Since my last video was on the subject of quarantine and observation, the topic is fresh in my mind, so let's cover this first. They've got a few small tanks set up here to quarantine new arrivals. Guys, this is so uncommon in the industry. If I had to guess, I would say that less than 5% of the stores out there, at any level, whether it be at the collector level, wholesale, or retail, do this. 5%. I don't know if this comes as a surprise to you, but that number is probably an upward trend. A few years ago, I would have guessed far less than 1% did. I know a thing or two about pest and disease prevention at scale, and it is no joke. It takes a lot of perseverance, and before all these bans took place, almost none of these places at, let's say, the 5,000 gallon plus scale would even dip their new arrivals. Not even dip them. They would just sell it before any pest issues ever mattered, and it was just an understood part of the industry. Some of the larger wholesalers would literally not even open the boxes and introduce them into their systems. A box would arrive and they would ship it right back out. After that, the contents of that box would go straight into a retailer's tank. If there is a positive aspect of all the recent coral bans, it's that companies have to take a hard look at aquaculture, and the ones that decide to take that step are faced with the real problems pests represent. So here's an example. Now you want to be a coral farmer. Congratulations, you've made 1,000 frags of zoas. Now you get to watch them get eaten over the course of a week by nudibranchs and sea spiders. Before, a lot of these places never had to worry about pests because the corals would come in and ship out quickly. But if you're talking about long-term farming, pests and disease can cause crushing losses. Now that aquaculture is being more of a thing, companies that are higher and higher in the chain are taking steps to clean up their stock, even at the collector level, and this was just unheard of a couple years ago. In that sense, this recent trend is great for consumers because there are at least now several stages where pest management is happening. It's still nowhere close to where it should be, but at least there's some effort taking place. The fact that Cherry takes the time and effort to do this is excellent, and their efforts are reflected in the health of their corals. There's a really big difference between corals straight from the ocean and the ones that have been cultured in captivity for a long time. The second part of pest management is the selection of fish and inverts to help keep down anything that makes it through quarantine. In each tank, I see a herbivore, like a tang or a rabbitfish, a team of damsels, a 6-line wrasse, and scooter blennies, which help pick off a lot of little crustaceans and things like that that might be bothering the corals. In some tanks there are shrimp, either a cleaner shrimp or a harlequin shrimp. The harlequin shrimp takes care of Asterina stars, which kind of are a pest. They usually don't bother corals. Some varieties do eat things like Pocillopora though. And the cleaner shrimp is to take care of any ill fish. The problem though with some cleaner shrimp is that once they get to a certain size, sometimes they can mess with corals a little bit. Finally, let's go over the coral system design. Each one of these is kind of like a U shape of tanks consisting of 2 coral holding tanks, 2 settling sumps, and a sump for equipment. Their coral tanks are fed water from the sump from the far end and drained back first into an empty settling tank before then draining back into the equipment sump. I like the idea of a settling chamber in the system. First, it adds additional volume, which provides temperature and chemical stability. The other thing that it allows for is easy detritus removal. The flow in the coral tanks can be kicked into high gear to prevent detritus from settling on the corals. If you keep it in suspension long enough, it just goes right down into the overflows. The coral tanks will still have to be cleaned from time to time, but the design of the system helps mitigate the effects of the detritus landing on the corals or building up in a corner someplace. Once the detritus piles up in the settling tank, it can be siphoned out. I think they do that once a quarter. The equipment that they're using right now for filtration is a protein skimmer and then a dosing system for 2-part. They really pay a lot of close attention to their water chemistry. I think Todd said they test some parameters daily. As for lighting, they use a mix of T5 and LED. For the majority of the systems, they were using retrofit T5 lights and Reef Bright LED strips. Those were mainly for their LPS and ZOA systems. For their one Acropora system, they went with Ecotech Radions, and they seem to be very happy with the results. I've been a T5 guy for a very long time, and I was a little worried about getting so heavy into LED for my next system, but the results Cherry is getting with their Acropora is very encouraging. That pretty much does it from here. Thanks for watching. I picked up a couple choice pieces from this trip and headed back home. I definitely plan on making another trip in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick video to see another coral farming operation. Don't forget to leave a like, and if you like this sort of video, I invite you to join the community by subscribing and hitting the notification bell to stay up on all of our recent uploads. Until next time, happy reefing.